He was petrified, frozen in the doorway, at the sight of his wife, Isabela, screaming and poised to strike Maria over a broken vase. The air in the opulent hall grew thick, charged with a tension so palpable that even Maria's crystalline tears seemed suspended in time as she knelt over the scattered fragments of the Ming porcelain. The scene, a violent contrast to the lavish luxury that surrounded them, wounded the eyes and soul of Fernando, who had just set foot in his home after a grueling business trip that had kept him away for weeks. The vibrant, ceaseless rhythm of Mexico City had fallen silent for him, drowned out by the injustice unfolding before his eyes. The incident, far more than a mere transgression over a damaged object, revealed the raw cruelty that was eating away at the foundations of his own home, an uncomfortable truth that had remained hidden beneath the glitter of the chandeliers. Isabella's raised hand, adorned with diamonds, trembled with fury. But it was the fear in Maria's eyes, not his wife's rage, that made Fernando react. With a roar he rarely used outside the boardroom, he thrust himself between the two women, his imposing figure shattering the invisible barrier of terror that held the young maid captive. The shards of the vase crunched under his leather shoes, a dull echo of the storm about to be unleashed. Maria, her face pale and her knuckles white from clenching her uniform, dared to lift her gaze for an instant, meeting in her employer's eyes an indecipherable mix of surprise and a contained fury entirely different from the one radiating from his relentless millionaire wife. "Isabela, what in God's name do you think you're doing?" Fernando snapped, his voice resonating with an authority he seldom applied at home, but which now felt more than justified. Isabela, her face flushed with anger and contempt, slowly lowered her hand, not out of submission, but from the humiliation of being reprimanded in front of an employee, an inferior. Maria, a young woman of 25, shrank even further, wishing the earth would swallow her whole. Trapped in the crossfire of a marriage that seemed to be crumbling over something so trivial, her heart hammered against her ribs, a drumbeat of anxiety that threatened to suffocate her. The bohemian crystal chandeliers hanging majestically from the ceiling seemed to flicker, reflecting the emotional chaos that had seized the luxurious mansion. Isabela, regaining her composure, though her glare still burned into Maria, turned to Fernando with an icy smile, a mask of superiority that barely concealed her rage. "Darling, you're finally home. This clumsy girl has shattered my Ming vase, a gift from my mother. You know how much her incompetence costs. It's unacceptable. She needs a lesson." Her voice dripped with a classism so ingrained she considered it normal, an absolute truth that gave her the right to humiliate anyone she pleased. To her, Maria was not a person, but another object in the house, disposable and replaceable. Her dignity was non-existent next to material value. The young woman, still on the floor, felt a fire in her cheeks, a shame that seared itself into her soul, marking her deeply. Fernando clenched his jaw, his eyes fixed on Maria, who, despite her submissive posture, held an unbreakable spark of dignity, a faint light that refused to be extinguished. "A vase is not worth a humiliation, Isabela, and it is not your place to teach anyone a lesson, especially not like this. I forbid you to ever raise your hand to an employee again, no matter who it is." His voice, though firm, carried a note of weariness, of exhaustion with her repeated cruelty. Maria felt a flicker of relief, a single drop of water in her desert of humiliation, though the fear of losing her job, her only means of support for herself and her younger sister, remained a tight knot in her stomach. Justice, she thought, was a luxury few in her position could afford. She rose slowly, her eyes clouded with silent tears, but her posture, while still cautious, had gained a fraction of firmness. "I am so sorry, Miss Isabella. It was an accident. I didn't mean to." Her voice was barely a whisper, yet it was laden with an honesty that contrasted sharply with the hypocrisy hanging in the air. Inside, her soul cried out for a just life, for a chance to escape a cycle of fear and servitude. She thought of her little sister, to whom she had promised a better future, a home where they wouldn't have to live in constant fear of being dismissed, of not having enough to eat. That promise was her engine, her silent strength to carry on. An accident. It's always an accident with you people. You're all the same. Incompetents who don't deserve the trust you're given, Isabella bellowed, ignoring her husband's intervention and Maria's plea. Her contempt was a poisoned arrow aimed to wound not just Maria, but anyone who dared to contradict her. Exhausted by the drama and his wife's constant cruelty, Fernando grabbed her arm firmly. "That's enough, Isabella. I will not allow you to continue this spectacle. You have crossed the line." The confrontation, about far more than the vase, was a deep fissure cracking open in their marriage, revealing years of resentment and irreconcilable differences. The other servants, silent witnesses to the drama, vanished, leaving the couple alone with the echo of their bitter words. As the argument between the Alcántaras escalated, Maria seized the distraction to retreat in silence, her heart still racing, but her mind focused on her pending tasks, the only way she knew to keep her dignity intact amidst the chaos. Each step took her further from the epicenter of the storm, toward the relative peace of the staff quarters, where luxury was but a distant echo. No matter how painful the humiliation, she knew she had to endure. For her sister, for the future she yearned for. Fernando's gaze, though fleeting, had ignited a small spark of hope within her, a brief respite. After a heated argument that left a bitter taste of defeat in his mouth, Fernando was left alone in the immense hall, staring at the remains of the vase. It wasn't the material cost that disturbed him, but the ease with which his wife could wield such cruelty, such a profound lack of empathy. Something in Maria's frightened face, in the humility of her apology, had struck a chord within him. There was an innocence, a vulnerability he could not ignore. Why did he feel so protective of her? The question hammered in his head. He felt there was something more, a missing piece in the puzzle of his life and his family's, a truth buried under years of opulence, waiting to be unearthed. Isabella, for her part, locked herself in her private study, seething with rage. Fernando's reprimand in front of a servant was a personal affront, a public humiliation she would not forgive. "That girl will pay dearly for her clumsiness," she fumed, "and for my husband's insolence in defending her. No one embarrasses me in my own house and gets away with it." Her Machiavellian mind was already weaving plans to make Maria's life impossible, to ensure the young woman would regret ever breaking the vase, ever being the catalyst for such a shameful scene. Control and power were her oxygen, and no one, absolutely no one, would threaten her position or her false sense of superiority. Maria reached her small room in the service wing, a modest but clean space she shared with the hope of a better future. She sat on the edge of her bed, her hands trembling. Closing her eyes, she pictured the face of her little sister, Sophia, the reason for her tireless effort. "I can't give up, Sophia. You depend on me," she told herself, her voice barely audible. The humiliations were the price of their survival, but they would not erase her dignity. She dreamed of the day she could offer Sophia an education, a safe home, far from scornful glares and hurtful shouts. That was the promise that kept her anchored, her greatest treasure in life. Unable to get Maria out of his head, Fernando began to rummage through the old drawers of his father's study with an unusual curiosity. Among dusty documents, old letters, and personal effects, he was searching for something, though he didn't know exactly what. A strange feeling drove him, as if destiny were guiding his hands. Suddenly, his fingers brushed against a small photo album, covered in green velvet and forgotten under a pile of newspapers. He opened it cautiously, its yellowed pages revealing faces from the past, some familiar, others blurred by time. And then, in the middle of the family collection, one image caught his eye, one that didn't belong, one that seemed to whisper a story. The next day, the routine in the Alcántara mansion resumed with an apparent normality, but the tension remained palpable. Maria, in her impeccable uniform, moved like a shadow, performing her duties with the same dedication as always. She mopped marble floors that shone brighter than the future she envisioned for herself, polished silverware that weighed less than the burden on her shoulders, and served coffee in fine porcelain cups that contrasted with the simplicity of her own life. The Alcántara's luxury was a constant backdrop, a reminder of the unbridgeable gap that separated her world from theirs, a painful daily reality. Isabela, with a smile that never reached her eyes, watched Maria's every move. Her plan for silent revenge was already in motion. Each interaction was an opportunity to remind the young woman of her place, to chip away at her spirit with small gestures of contempt. The mansion, once a simple home, had transformed into a psychological battlefield where wealth and power were the cruelest weapons. "You will soon regret crossing my path, girl," Isabela thought, feigning indifference, savoring the power she held over Maria's life. For her, Maria remained an insignificant pawn on her personal chessboard. The oppression had only just begun. It was an old photograph, slightly faded, showing his father, Don Ricardo Alcántara, as a young man, standing next to a woman with delicate features and a sweet smile, who was holding a little girl in her arms. The girl had beach-dark, inquisitive eyes that were strangely familiar. Fernando's heart lurched. That image, so incongruous with his family's official history, unleashed a flood of questions. Who were these people? Why had he never seen this photo before? And why did that little girl, with her noble gaze, remind him so much of Maria? The truth, hidden until now, was beginning to surface, a tiny crack in the wall of his family's reality, threatening to bring it all crashing down. Meanwhile, Maria, oblivious to the discovery unfolding in the main study, continued with her chores, her hands accustomed to the work, but her mind flying free. She looked out at the meticulously manicured garden, the rose bushes full of blooms that seemed to smile at the sun. She promised herself that one day she would have a small garden of her own, with no crystal chandeliers to judge her, no shouts to humiliate her. That small vision of peace was her refuge, the light at the end of an endless tunnel. But what she would discover at dawn the next day, a truth that would irrevocably link her to the Alcántara Empire, would surpass any dream or nightmare she could possibly imagine, changing the course of her destiny forever. Fernando could not sleep that night. The photograph, the little girl's gaze, the strange connection to Maria, it all swirled in a vortex of thoughts. The image of his father, a man he had always considered unimpeachable, was now cast in a different light, veiled in mystery. He decided he could not ignore this unease. The next day, he would visit Doña Elena, the elderly woman who had worked for his family for decades, a woman who knew every corner and every secret of the mansion. Only she, with her prodigious memory, could unravel the enigma of the photograph. Could the truth finally come to light and change everything in the lives of the Alcántaras? The next morning arrived with the promise of revelations. Fernando rose with a renewed determination, the photograph tucked discreetly in his pocket, a light but significant weight. The mansion, which had once seemed a sanctuary of success, now felt like a prison of secrets, built on half-truths and complicit silences. His search for answers would take him beyond the superficial, into the depths of his family's history, where Maria's dignity and his own sense of justice awaited vindication. Fate had already woven its threads, and the truth was about to be unleashed, regardless of the pain it might cause in its wake. With his heart in his throat and the old photograph creasing in his pocket, Fernando made his way to the modest home of Doña Elena. The humble facade of the house, with its faded walls and small garden full of geraniums, stood in stark contrast to the opulent Alcántara mansion, where luxury was as suffocating as the secrets he now believed he was uncovering. Anxiety gnawed at him. He needed answers, a confirmation that would make sense of the image of his father and the enigmatic little girl. The fresh street air, filled with everyday smells, was a reprieve, but the emotional burden he carried was immense, a premonition of a truth that promised to transform his world completely. Doña Elena, a woman whose face was lined with age, but whose eyes were lively and full of wisdom, received him at the threshold with a warm smile. With a gesture of her wrinkled hand, she ushered him into the small sitting room, where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and dried herbs wrapped him in a comforting embrace. She noticed the urgency in Fernando's eyes, an unease that made her brow furrow slightly. She had been a silent witness to many of the Alcántara family's stories. She had seen loves born and die, fortunes rise, and the hidden pain behind the forced smiles of high society. Her intuition, sharpened by the years, told her this was no ordinary visit, but the beginning of a profound revelation. Without preamble, Fernando drew the photograph from his pocket and held it out to Doña Elena. She took it with trembling hands, her eyes, once sparkling, clouded over with a deep melancholy as she recognized the faces. A sigh escaped her lips, heavy with memories and long-held sorrow. "Oh, Ricardo," she murmured, stroking the image of her former employer. The little girl in the photo, with that achingly familiar gaze, caused her chin to tremble. Fernando watched her reaction, every gesture, every micro-expression, searching for confirmation of his suspicions. The silence in the room grew heavy, broken only by the ticking of an old wall clock, as the truth began to slowly unfold before him. In a soft voice, tinged with an old sadness, Doña Elena began her story. Don Ricardo was a good-hearted man, Fernando, though appearances could sometimes be deceiving. Before he married your mother, there was another love in his life. A true love, one that society could not accept. A sweet girl, Aurora, from a humble family, but with a nobility of spirit that captivated your father. She described how Ricardo, caught between family duty and his passion, had tried to keep the relationship a secret, a forbidden idol that blossomed far from the judgmental eyes and gossip of the elite. It was a story of love and sacrifice, condemned to the shadows by the unforgiving rules of their world. Aurora was the light of your father's life, Doña Elena continued, her eyes fixed on the photograph. He promised he would never abandon her, that he would take care of her and the fruit of their love. But the pressure from the Alcántara family, the impeccable reputation they had to maintain at all costs, was an insurmountable wall. Don Ricardo, the young heir, was forced to fulfill social expectations, to marry the woman they had chosen for him, despite the ache in his heart. Aurora, with admirable dignity, understood the situation. She never stopped loving Ricardo, and she proudly carried the secret of their daughter, a child she named Maria, in honor of her own mother. The old woman explained how the birth of the child had changed everything, yet the need for secrecy remained absolute. Your grandfather, an inflexible man, would never have allowed the family fortune to be stained by such a scandal, Elena whispered, her tone still laced with a latent fear from that time. Ricardo, though heartbroken, was compelled to marry Fernando's mother, fulfilling his duty to his lineage while secretly supporting Aurora and their daughter. Maria's life, from her very first breath, was marked by this hidden truth, an inheritance of love and pain, of wealth and secrecy, that kept her in the shadow of a world that was hers by right. That little girl, Fernando, Doña Elena said, pointing to the photo, is Maria, the same Maria who now works in your house. Aurora, her mother left the city to protect her, to give her a life away from the gossip. But Ricardo never forsook them. He always watched over them, kept them safe as much as he could. The revelation struck Fernando like a bolt of lightning. Maria, the humble young woman his wife had tried to strike, was his sister. Her large, noble eyes, her gentleness, their inexplicable connection. It all made a painful, yet liberating kind of sense. The veil of family secrets was torn away, exposing a truth as raw as it was necessary. Fernando felt the air leave his lungs. Maria, my sister, he gasped, the echo of his voice resounding in the small room. She wasn't just a vulnerable employee. She wasn't just a stranger he had felt compelled to protect. She was his blood, an unbreakable bond forged in a past that was now emerging with overwhelming force. The indignation he felt over the humiliations Maria had suffered transformed into a protective rage, an unquenchable fire that burned in his chest. His father, the unimpeachable man, had carried such a deep secret, a love so sincere that now revealed itself as the key to unraveling the present. With tears in her eyes, Doña Elena recounted Aurora's final years, her illness, and the promise she made to Ricardo on his deathbed that she would look after Maria and her younger sister, Sophia, who had been left orphaned and destitute. Don Ricardo always knew he had to protect them, but the fear of dishonoring the family, of losing the empire, tied his hands. He promised to make everything right, but time ran out for him. It always tormented him that he never acknowledged her openly. Elena's words were a testament to love and regret, a heavy burden that now fell upon Fernando's shoulders, the heir to a legacy that included not only a fortune, but also an immense moral debt. Fernando listened to every word, every detail, and felt his perception of the world crumble and rebuild itself all at once. The image of his father, the respected and severe businessman, became human, revealing the complexities of a divided heart. But the most shocking revelation was Maria, the young woman who, unknowingly, had lived under the same roof as her brother, enduring the scorn of her sister-in-law, never knowing the right that bound her to that place. The injustice of it all cried out, and Fernando felt an urgent, overwhelming need to amend the past, to repair the damage, and to give Maria the place that had always rightfully been hers. With a sincere gratitude that sprang from his soul, Fernando bid farewell to Doña Elena, who embraced him with maternal tenderness. "Do what is right, Fernando," she whispered in his ear, "so that your father's soul may find peace, and Maria may find the justice she deserves." Her words resonated in his mind as he returned to the mansion, which he no longer saw as a home, but as a labyrinth of secrets and lies. The photograph, now a precious treasure, burned in his pocket, a tangible reminder of the truth. His heart, once occupied only by business, now beat with a different purpose, one guided by justice and a newfound filial love. As he crossed the threshold of his house, the sight of Maria polishing an antique table in the foyer struck him with unusual force. Her hands, which he had barely noticed before, now seemed like those of a silent heroine. Her noble gaze, veiled with weariness, held a special light. Every movement, every sigh from the young woman, became a mute reproach to the history that had condemned her to invisibility. Fernando felt a mixture of guilt and steely determination. He could not ignore this truth any longer. His sister, his own flesh and blood, could not continue to be humiliated under his own roof. The true battle for dignity was about to begin. Maria, oblivious to the storm brewing inside Fernando, continued with her chores, sensing a strange vibration in the air. She felt her employer's gaze on her, more intense, more charged than usual, a mixture of pain and unshakable resolve that unsettled her. She wondered if she had done something wrong, if the argument from the previous day still hung between them. Her mind, however, clung to her routine, to the manual labor that kept her anchored to reality, far from the worries she could not control. Her dream of a better future for Sophia was her only solace in the uncertainty of each day, a small beacon in the darkness. Fernando, now observing Maria through a different lens, noticed every subtle gesture of contempt from Isabela, an order given with excessive harshness, a look laden with superiority, a veiled comment about the ineptitude of certain people. Each of these small cruelties felt like a personal wound to him. Before, he had tolerated them, attributing them to his wife's difficult character. But now, they were a direct attack on his sister, on his father's memory, on the truth. The mansion, once a symbol of his success, now seemed like a theater of injustice, where his sister was the protagonist of a silent, tragic play. Isabela, unaware of the dangerous revelation Fernando had discovered, felt she had won a small victory in seeing Maria still at her post, albeit under stricter scrutiny. She thought that Fernando, despite his initial outburst, was incapable of going against her for a simple maid. This miscalculation emboldened her, and her cruelty, far from diminishing, intensified. She believed she was in complete control, and every interaction with Maria was an opportunity to remind her of her place, to chip away at her spirit with small acts of contempt, not knowing that each humiliation was digging her own grave, awakening a latent fury in her husband. One day, as Maria was busy in the main hallway, polishing the valuable silver service for that evening's dinner, Isabella appeared with a glass of red wine in her hand, her jewels glittering with a cold light. The young woman respectfully stepped aside, trying to avoid any contact that might trigger another reprimand. But Isabella had other plans. Her gaze, a mixture of mockery and disdain, settled on Maria, who wore her starched uniform, a symbol of her position, but also of her unwavering dignity. The intimate, cruel scene was set before the eyes of other fearful employees who pretended to be busy. Suddenly, with a barely concealed theatricality, Isabella tripped, accidentally spilling the contents of her glass directly onto Maria's freshly cleaned uniform. The red wine spread like a bloodstain across the white fabric, a vivid symbol of humiliation. "Oh, how clumsy of me," Isabella exclaimed with an icy smile, not a shred of remorse in her eyes. "But you should have been more careful, don't you think? Always in the way. It seems you don't just break vases, you attract disasters too." Her voice, a mere poisonous whisper, dripped with a malice designed to annihilate Maria's self-worth. Maria felt a hot blush rise to her cheeks, a burning shame that seared her soul. Her hands trembled, not with rage but with helplessness. The other servants, mute witnesses to the scene, lowered their gazes, silent accomplices to the abuse. A single tear rolled down Maria's cheek, but she didn't dare wipe it away. She knew she had to maintain her composure, to keep her dignity intact despite the taunt. She took a deep breath, clinging to the image of Sophia. "It doesn't matter," she told herself. "This too shall pass. I must be strong for her." The wine stain was just one more test of her resilience. Fernando, who had come down the stairs at that very moment, witnessed the entire scene. Fury ignited in his eyes. To see Isabella humiliate his own sister with such coldness, with such premeditation, was an execrable act. He clenched his fists but held himself back. He knew a direct, premature confrontation would only make things worse for Maria. He needed irrefutable proof, a plan. The stain on Maria's uniform was a symbol of the stain Isabella was leaving on her own soul, and on the honor of the Alcántara name. He could no longer be a passive spectator to such cruelty. That night, the tension in the mansion was palpable. Fernando waited for Isabela to retire to her study after dinner, under the pretext of reviewing some documents. He found her sitting at her desk, reading a fashion magazine with a look of self-satisfaction. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and laden with a restrained threat. "I need to talk to you, Isabela." She looked up, one eyebrow arched, her mask of coldness intact. The air in the room grew thick, heavy with unspoken words and the truths Fernando guarded jealously, waiting for the right moment to unleash the coming storm. "Isabela," Fernando began, his voice resonating with an authority he rarely used at home. "Your accidents are becoming more and more transparent. What are you trying to achieve with all this? I will not allow you to continue treating the staff this way, and especially not Maria." His piercing gaze left no room for doubt about his seriousness. This wasn't a simple reprimand, it was a warning. He felt that with each passing day, Isabela crossed a new line, pushing the limits of his patience. This was no longer about a vase, it was about human dignity, a fundamental principle she seemed to have forgotten entirely. Isabela, with a dismissive gesture, set the magazine aside and looked at Fernando with barely veiled contempt. "Darling, you make such a drama out of everything. It was just a little wine. So what?" She was a clumsy maid who wasn't paying attention. "I see no need for such concern over someone so insignificant. Has her pitiful little gaze captivated you? Don't turn this into something it's not." Her voice, dripping with cynicism, tried to minimize the situation. But Fernando knew that behind her words lay a malicious intent that went far beyond a simple accident. Fernando clenched his jaw, fighting the urge to scream the truth at her right then and there. It wasn't time yet. Recklessness could cost Maria her safety. "It's not the stain, Isabela. It's the intention. And a person's dignity is not insignificant, no matter who they are. Understand this clearly. I will not tolerate any more abuse in this house." His voice, though controlled, carried the weight of a veiled threat. Inside, he wrestled with his rage and the need to protect his sister, unable to yet reveal the secret he kept. Each day was a precarious balance between prudence and the drive for justice, an internal battle that was consuming him whole. Meanwhile, Maria had retreated to her modest service quarters, trying to scrub the wine stain from her uniform. The tears she had held back in front of Isabela now streamed freely down her cheeks. The humiliation cut deep, but it would not break her. She stared at her reflection in the small mirror. Her eyes showed exhaustion, but also a spark of defiance. "They cannot take my pride. They cannot," she whispered, her thoughts turning to Sophia. Her sister was her driving force, her reason to rise each morning, to endure the cruelty, to dream of a future where dignity was not a luxury, but a universal, inalienable right. The next day, under a trivial pretext, Fernando approached Maria as she prepared breakfast. In an uncharacteristically gentle voice, he asked if she felt all right, if she needed anything, offering her a simpler task in the library. Maria was taken aback by her patron's sudden interest, an attention she had never before received. Her eyes, accustomed to indifference, met his, now filled with an unfamiliar warmth. "I am fine, Señor Fernando. Thank you. I don't need anything," she replied cautiously, wary of such unexpected kindness. She did not know that this kindness was not a gesture of charity, but the first stirring of a blood tie about to be revealed. a shift in the currents of fate. As Fernando struggled to contain his protective instincts, news of the vase incident and his sudden attention toward Maria began to spread like wildfire among the staff. The rumors soon reached the ears of Isabela, who, feeling her position threatened, decided to take more drastic measures. She contacted the lawyers for the Alcántara board of directors, sowing seeds of concern about potential baseless claims and damage to the family's image. Her voice, cold and calculating, made it clear that she would not tolerate any scandal that could affect her standing or the family's fortune. A pretext to silence Maria once and for all, before her secret could ever come to light. In a private meeting, the top lawyers from the company's board, among them the feared director Mendoza, a ruthless and unscrupulous businessman, sat down to discuss the situation. "We have heard disturbing rumors," one of them began, his brow furrowed, "about a possible emotional involvement of Don Ricardo with a member of the household staff." The mention of an illegitimate child, though veiled, hung heavy in the air. Fernando's interest in Maria, still a mystery to them, set off alarm bells, signaling a potential legal battle that could divide the vast Alcántara empire, something they could not, under any circumstances, allow. "We must contain this situation before it becomes a public scandal that affects the company's reputation and the value of our shares," Director Mendoza declared, tapping the table with his index finger. His voice was glacial, his gaze calculating every risk. To him, Maria was not a person, but a variable in a financial equation. "Our priority is to protect the interests of the Alcántara family, which means avoiding any claim or negative publicity. Discretion is vital. And if that requires a settlement, we will provide one. We cannot allow an intruder to jeopardize what we have so carefully built." After a brief deliberation, they decided to approach Maria with an offer: a substantial severance package in exchange for her silence and her departure from Mexico City. It was a preemptive measure designed to eradicate any potential threat to the stability of the Alcántara empire. A non-disclosure agreement would be the key. To them, it was a practical, cost-effective solution to a potential problem. A way to buy the silence of a vulnerable young woman who, by their calculations, would have no choice but to accept. Their cold, transactional worldview blinded them to the dignity Maria embodied. Mr. Ortiz, a senior lawyer at the firm with a reputation for being discreet and effective, was assigned this delicate mission. Though his loyalty to the Alcántaras was unquestionable, a flicker of conscience remained within him. He had known Don Ricardo in his final years and had sensed the weight of a secret, a burden the patriarch could never bring himself to confess. Ortiz, though he did not know the full truth, felt a strange discomfort at the prospect of negotiating with a young woman who seemed so innocent. It was a job, yes, but one that left a bitter taste in his mouth, a premonition that something was deeply wrong. Acting with the utmost discretion, Mr. Ortiz contacted Maria through an intermediary, requesting an urgent meeting at a small cafe far from the mansion. He ensured the invitation was formal enough that she would not refuse, yet vague enough not to arouse suspicion. The chosen location was a quiet corner with marble-top tables and a serene atmosphere, ideal for a delicate conversation. The prospect of this meeting frayed Maria's nerves. She was torn between curiosity and a profound fear of the intentions hidden behind such an unusual invitation. Though filled with apprehension, Maria accepted, Her heart pounded, a mix of hope and trepidation. What could a lawyer for the Alcántara family want with me? She wondered, her thoughts spiraling. The promise of any improvement to her financial situation, any chance to offer Sophia a better life, was a light she couldn't ignore. But she also felt a pang of mistrust, an intuition that this meeting was not for her benefit, but for theirs. She clung to her dignity. The only possession she felt was truly hers, ready to face whatever was to come. At the cafe, Mr. Ortiz, a middle-aged man in an impeccable suit with a penetrating gaze, introduced himself with a cold professionalism. After some formal pleasantries, he extended a sealed envelope to Maria. "Miss," he began, "we represent the Alcántara family. We have been authorized to offer you compensation for recent incidents and to ensure discretion. It is a generous offer, which includes a considerable sum of money and assistance in relocating. The only condition is your complete silence and your departure from the city." His words were a dagger wrapped in silk, striking Maria directly in the heart, an assault on her honor, an attempt to purchase her soul. Maria's eyes widened as a chill ran down her spine. But why? What have I done to deserve this? Is it because of the vase? The wine? Her voice was a barely audible whisper, but her heart screamed with silent indignation. The offer, however tempting the sum, felt like an insult to her integrity, a way to erase her, to silence her, as if she were a mistake. Her dignity, that unbreakable treasure, felt trampled upon. The thought of running away, of abandoning her life for money, stained by secrecy and humiliation, felt like a betrayal of herself and her sister. Mr. Ortiz, maintaining his professional tone, added another layer of pressure. "It is not a matter of blame, miss, but of convenience for all parties. With this sum, you could secure a future for yourself and your sister, far from any misunderstandings. It is for your own good and for your sister's. You will avoid greater trouble and unwanted attention." His words, laced with a veiled threat, sought to exploit Maria's deepest fear, Sophia's well-being. But the young woman, though frightened, felt a spark of rebellion ignite within her. She knew that accepting would mean admitting to a guilt she did not bear, becoming complicit in an injustice that pained her to her very core. With a firmness that surprised the lawyer himself, Maria took the sealed envelope and placed it back on the table. "No, Mr. Ortiz, I appreciate your offer, but I do not accept money for my silence. I have nothing to hide, no guilt to be bought, and my dignity is not for sale. If there is something you need to know, tell me plainly, but do not try to silence me with crumbs." Her words, though softly spoken, resonated with an unshakable force in the quiet cafe. The lawyer, bewildered by her refusal, saw in her a determination he had not expected from a young woman in her position, a resistance that threatened to unravel the Alcántara's plans. Mr. Ortiz returned to the Alcántara offices, visibly frustrated. "The girl refuses, Mr. Mendoza. She is more stubborn than we anticipated. She says she has nothing to hide and that her dignity has no price." Director Mendoza listened to the report with a deepening scowl, his face hardening with anger. Maria's resistance was not just an inconvenience. It was an affront to his authority and that of the family. "Insolence," he muttered. "It seems we will have to find other ways to make her understand her place. If she won't cooperate, then we will force her hand. No one defies the Alcántaras. and gets away with it. The tension was mounting, and the game was becoming far more dangerous. When Isabela learned of Maria's refusal, her fury was boundless. The fool, she has no idea who she's dealing with. How dare a servant reject such a generous offer from the Alcántara family? Her voice, heavy with contempt, echoed in her study. Maria's defiance, far from intimidating her, only spurred her to intensify her campaign of harassment. I will make her regret the day she was born. I will put her on the street without a penny, and she will be on her hands and knees, begging for forgiveness. The darkness in her heart deepened, ready to annihilate any glimmer of hope in Maria's life to keep her own social standing untouched. As expected, rumors of a potential scandal in the Alcántara family began to intensify. The tabloid press, always hungry for exclusives on the elite, started publishing vague yet insinuating articles about a family secret that threatened to shake the foundations of one of the country's most powerful empires. Blurry, secretly taken photographs of Maria circulated on social media, fueling speculation. The media pressure grew, turning the young woman's life into a media circus, even though no one yet knew the full truth. Maria's name, once anonymous, was now on everyone's lips, associated with a scandal she did not fully comprehend. Fernando, seeing the slanderous headlines and vile speculation, felt his blood boil. Not only was Maria being defamed, but so was the memory of his father, albeit in a twisted way. This has gone too far, he growled, slamming his hand on his study desk. This was no longer just a matter of family secrets or a dispute with Isabela. It was about the reputation and dignity of an innocent woman, his sister. He knew the press, once unleashed, was relentless. The truth, however shocking, had to be presented in an irrefutable way to silence the vultures. Seeking answers and a possible solution, Fernando confronted Mr. Ortiz again. Mr. Ortiz, this leak to the press is unacceptable. Who is behind it? Is it Isabela? This is destroying an innocent person's life. His voice, though controlled, vibrated with indignation. The lawyer, visibly uncomfortable, tried to deflect, but Fernando would not let him. He knew that Ortiz, despite his corporate loyalty, was not entirely without a soul, and he hoped the man might offer him a clue, some help to stop the media storm that threatened to engulf them all. Ortiz, his expression guarded, flatly denied any involvement from the firm. Senor Alcántara, our actions have always been within the bounds of the law, with discretion as our goal. The press has its own sources, as you know. It is possible that Senora Isabela, well, you know she has her contacts. His evasion confirmed Fernando's suspicions. Isabela, in her desperation to control the narrative and silence Maria, had resorted to dirty tactics, heedless of the collateral damage. An open war for the truth had been declared, and the only way to win was with evidence that left no room for doubt. Fernando understood that the only way to stop Isabela and the board's lawyers was with irrefutable proof. Doña Elena's story was powerful, but it wasn't enough for a court of law or to silence the press. He needed documents, something tangible that proved Maria's blood tie to his father. His mind raced, searching for any clue his father, Don Ricardo, might have left behind. He remembered Doña Elena's words about his father's regret, his promise to make things right, a promise Fernando now felt he had to fulfill. For his father's memory, and for his sister's dignity. Suddenly, a fleeting image crossed his mind, a small safe deposit box his father kept at a bank, a place he rarely mentioned, and one Fernando hadn't thought of since his death. A faint hope ignited in his heart. Could his father have kept some proof there? A document that would attest to the truth about Maria? It was a long shot, but it was the only one he had. He knew time was running out. With the Alcántara family's charity gala fast approaching, an event Isabela would use as her personal stage for her final, devastating move. The worst was yet to come. You must stay until the end. The dreaded annual Alcántara charity gala was approaching at a dizzying pace. Isabela, a triumphant smile already gracing her lips, had planned every detail of the evening. It was her grand opportunity to deliver the final blow to Maria, to humiliate her publicly and silence her forever. She had prepared a speech, a generous offer of compensation disguised as charity, which she would announce before the social elite of Mexico City. For her, it was the perfect end to a bothersome chapter, the consolidation of her power, and the definitive eradication of any threat to her impeccable reputation. That night, the Alcántara mansion glittered with a dazzling splendor. Maria, in her crisp uniform, moved among the guests, serving drinks and canapés with her usual efficiency, but her heart was heavy with a sense of foreboding. She could feel the weight of curious gazes, the veiled whispers, the insinuations the press had sown. She was the unwilling center of attention, an intruder in a world that judged her at every turn. Across the room, Isabela, radiant in a designer gown, watched her with a malicious smile. The air was thick with tension, a ticking time bomb poised to detonate amidst the opulence and pretense. During dinner, Isabela, a champagne flute in hand, rose to offer a toast. In a voice as smooth as honey, yet sharp as steel, she began to speak of the Alcántara family's generosity and the ingratitude of those who sought to take advantage of it. Her words, though seemingly innocuous, were laced with venom, crafted to denigrate Maria without ever uttering her name. The guests, all members of high society, understood the subtext. Some shifted uncomfortably, averting their eyes. Maria, standing near the main table, felt each word like the crack of a whip, yet she held her head high, her dignity an unbreakable armor. Some people, Isabela continued, fixing her icy gaze upon Maria, believe they can climb the social ladder through other methods. They think that pity or intrigue can open doors that effort and merit cannot. Her tone was saccharine, but the insinuation was a clear and direct assault on the young woman's morals and honor. A murmur rippled through the guests. Some wore expressions of shock, others of disapproval at the thinly veiled cruelty. The ballroom had become an invisible battlefield where words were the deadliest weapons, and Maria, the target of a merciless and unjust attack, stood her ground. An uncomfortable silence, heavy and dense, fell over the room. Guests glanced at one another, keenly aware of the baseness of the attack. Maria felt a flush of heat rise to her face, not from shame for anything she had done, but from the second-hand embarrassment she felt for Isabela. The dessert tray in her hands trembled slightly, but she refused to let her posture falter. She lifted her chin, her eyes meeting Fernando's. They were filled with anguish and an impotence he could not hide. It was a crucial moment, a crossroads where her silence could be mistaken for an admission of guilt, dealing an irreversible blow to her already fragile reputation. Unable to tolerate the outrage any longer, Fernando shot to his feet, his voice ringing with an authority that permitted no argument. Isabela, that is enough. That is a grave and utterly baseless accusation. I demand that you compose yourself and not tarnish this evening with your slander. This gala is for a charitable cause, not for your personal vendettas. His public and firm intervention stopped Isabela cold. She stared at him, a mixture of surprise and contained fury in her eyes. The guests, relieved, watched the scene with rapt attention, sensing the deep fissure cracking the opulent facade of their marriage. Recovering quickly, Isabela forced a frigid smile. Darling, I am merely speaking of what I see. Is the closeness of certain people not evident? Some take advantage of the generosity of others, of their hospitality, to weave their own ambitions. Her venomous eyes landed on Maria once more, attempting to pierce her armor of dignity. The attack was relentless, designed to shatter the young woman's spirit, to leave her with no recourse. It was a cruel display of power, a demonstration that, to her, the truth was merely another tool to manipulate and destroy anyone who stood in her way. But then, with a courage she didn't know she possessed, Maria took a step forward. Her voice, though soft, cut through the tense air of the room. Miss Isabela, I have only ever worked with honesty and dedication in this house. I have never sought anything more than dignified employment to support my sister. The insinuations you are making are false and offensive. Her simple, direct words resonated with an undeniable truth, a stark contrast to Isabela's calculated cruelty. Her noble gaze, steady and fearless, met Isabela's. For a moment, Isabela blinked, surprised by the young woman's unexpected resistance, a dignity that could not be bought or broken by lies. Maria's valiant response, charged with such pure honesty, silenced Isabela for a moment, leaving a profound impression on the guests. Many nodded in assent, moved by the young woman's fortitude. Isabela's charade was crumbling before Maria's simple grace. Seeing his sister's strength, Fernando felt a surge of pride and renewed determination. This woman, his sister, was far stronger than any of them had imagined. Her silent sacrifice, her resistance to humiliation, was a beacon of integrity in a sea of hypocrisy and luxury. Fernando sat down, but his mind was no longer on the scene before him. The image of Maria facing down Isabela with such bravery solidified his decision. He had to not only protect her, but restore her to her rightful place. His father, had he lived, would have wanted this. He felt as if time was slipping through his fingers. With the gala nearing its end and the possibility of Isabela launching her final assault, he looked around at the faces of high society, many of them silent accomplices to injustice, and he swore that tonight the truth would come to light, no matter the consequences for him or the Alcántara Empire. The gala continued, but the atmosphere had become electric. Isabela, furious at Fernando's interruption and Maria's unexpected rebuttal, retreated to a corner with her lawyers. They murmured, planning their next definitive move. She was convinced that her generous severance package would be the final blow, a masterstroke that would frame her as the victim and Maria as the opportunist. She was completely unaware that the threads of fate had already woven a different tapestry, one that Fernando, moved by a brother's love, was about to unravel. A truth so powerful it would shake the very foundations of their world. While Isabela conspired, Fernando acted with a feverish urgency. He knew he had to get to his father's safe deposit box at the bank before the night was over. Time was of the essence. With the help of a loyal employee who had worked with his father for years and held him in deep respect, he managed to bypass the bureaucratic hurdles and the bank's restrictive hours. Every minute was crucial, every obstacle a test of his resolve. He felt his father's presence, as if guiding his hands, as if Don Ricardo's spirit yearned for the long-silenced truth to finally emerge, for the sake of his forgotten daughter. Finally, after a race against the clock, Fernando held the keys to the box. His heart pounded as he opened the small metal door, revealing the secrets his father had guarded so zealously. Inside, he found a stack of documents, old wills, yellowed letters, birth certificates. But what struck him most was a small box containing a videotape, an old VHS cassette. A label, in his father's unmistakable handwriting, read, "For Fernando, about Maria." The breath caught in his throat. This was it, the missing piece. His father's voice, reaching out from beyond the grave, bearing the ultimate truth. With trembling hands, Fernando rushed back to the mansion. He couldn't wait. He had to see the contents of that tape immediately. He frantically searched his father's study for a VHS player he thought long forgotten. He found it, dusty and draped in cobwebs, but still functional. He connected the cables with desperate haste, his fingers clumsy with emotion. The screen flickered to life, revealing the familiar figure of his father, Don Ricardo, younger, but with the same profound gaze he had always had. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the soft whir of the VCR. On the screen, Don Ricardo Alcántara began to speak. His voice, though deep, was heavy with a barely contained emotion. He confessed his love for Aurora, the birth of Maria, and the immense pain of having had to keep it a secret to protect the family's reputation and fortune. He acknowledged Maria as his legitimate daughter, begging forgiveness for his cowardice and his silence. He described the trust fund he had created, securing the future for Maria and Sophia, and expressed his wish for the truth to come out, so that his daughter might receive the justice and recognition she deserved. It was a posthumous testament, a confession from the grave that cried out for the reparation of a great wrong. Tears streamed down Fernando's cheeks, mingling with rage and relief. His father's voice, so real, so sincere, was the confirmation he needed, the undeniable truth that freed him from years of doubt and secrets. His sister Maria was the rightful heir to a part of the fortune, not just an employee, not just a victim. The weight of his family's history, once a burden, now became a powerful weapon for justice. He swore to his father's image that he would fulfill his final wish, that Maria would receive what was hers, no matter the cost, no matter what Isabela might do. Fernando realized the magnitude of what he held. This video, along with the documents, not only vindicated Maria, but also exposed the hypocrisy and cruelty of Isabela. The power of the truth was absolute, capable of crumbling an empire built on a foundation of lies. His mind, once focused on revenge, now centered on justice, on restoration. He knew this revelation would shake high society, the press, and above all, Isabela, in a way she could never have imagined. A masterstroke orchestrated by the conscience of his late father, an unexpected legacy. As the video ended, the image of Maria, alone at the gala, facing Isabella's taunts, filled Fernando's thoughts. She, the true daughter of the patriarch, was being humiliated in the very house that was hers by right, and she didn't even know it. The contrast was heartbreaking. He felt a pang of guilt for not having acted sooner, for allowing her to suffer. But now he had the tools. He had the truth. He could not let tonight's gala end with Isabella's victory, with his sister's final humiliation. He had to act, and act fast. Justice was waiting, and he would be its instrument, the guardian of Maria's dignity. With unshakable determination, Fernando secured the tape and the important documents. He went quickly to the phone, dialing the number of Mr. Ortiz, the lawyer with the troubled conscience. Ortiz's voice sounded weary when he answered, likely expecting new instructions on how to silence Maria. Mr. Ortiz, Fernando said, his voice grave. I need you to come to the mansion immediately. I have something you must see, something that will change everything we thought we knew about the Alcántara family, and I want you to be present at the gala. I have a plan to ensure the truth, at long last, comes to light in the most decisive way possible. The lawyer, intrigued by Fernando's urgent and resolute tone, agreed, a chill running down his spine. He knew his role in the Alcántara's schemes was about to change drastically. Meanwhile, back in the main ballroom, Isabela, a triumphant smile on her face, was preparing to take the stage, ready to announce her generous severance package and seal Maria's fate. High society, oblivious to the drama unfolding behind the scenes, sipped champagne and nibbled on delicacies. The stage was set. The truth, like a silent hurricane, was about to be unleashed, to change everything, for better or for worse, forever. Isabela, with a smile of false benevolence that barely concealed her triumph, ascended to the stage of the majestic gala. The sparkle of her diamonds rivaled that of the crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. High society, dressed in their finest and full of anticipation, watched her with a mixture of admiration and morbid curiosity, unaware of the storm that was about to break. In her mind, she had already won. Her plan to humiliate Maria and banish her from Mexico City forever was about to reach its glorious conclusion. Her voice, sweet and melodious, enveloped the hall as she prepared for the final blow, one she believed would cement her own reputation and silence her troublesome employee, an insignificant pawn on her chessboard of power. Maria, her heart sinking, watched the scene from a discreet corner, serving champagne with trembling hands. The whispers, the furtive glances, everything told her she was the center of unwanted attention, a pariah in a world of opulence. She felt the weight of the injustice, the fear of what Isabela might announce, but her dignity, like a small flame in the darkness, refused to be extinguished. I must be strong, she told herself, clinging to the image of Sophia, her little sister, the only reason she endured the daily humiliations. She did not know that fate, with its supreme irony, was about to turn her life upside down. Isabela, raising her glass, began her speech with an effusive welcome, praising the generosity of those present and the noble cause of the family foundation. Her words were poison wrapped in silk, preparing the ground for her attack. Tonight, beyond philanthropy, I wish to address a delicate situation, she said, her gaze locking onto Maria, who felt a shiver run down her spine, anticipating the knife's twist. A small misunderstanding that, fortunately, we have been able to resolve with the same generosity that defines us. The silence in the room was almost sepulchral. All eyes were fixed on the elegant figure of Mrs. Alcántara, awaiting her next move. Because, unfortunately, Isabella continued, lowering her voice to a confidential tone, there are those who, under the guise of innocence, seek to take advantage of the good faith of families. People who, with cunning and manipulation, try to climb the social ladder, seeking financial gain where there should only be gratitude and service. Her icy eyes locked onto Maria, who felt a fire rise in her cheeks, a shame that was not her own, but a reflection of another's cruelty. The murmurs in the room grew louder. Some guests nodded in agreement, while others, uncomfortable, looked away, keenly aware of the baseness of the public assault. Maria pressed her lips together, her knuckles turning white around the tray she held. A single, silent tear welled in her eye, but she refused to let it fall. Her gaze, filled with a profound sadness, met Fernando's for a fleeting moment. He watched her, his expression a mask of pain and restrained fury. She felt the public humiliation like a whip against her skin, but an inner strength, an unbreakable spark in her soul, kept her from crumbling. They will not, she thought, her mind clinging to the image of her sister, the source of her unwavering dignity, her only reason to endure this darkest of nights. They will not break me, she promised herself. Watching the scene unfold, Fernando felt rage boiling in his veins. Isabella's cruelty was unbearable, a direct affront to Maria and to the memory of his father. He clenched his fists beneath the table, waiting for the precise moment to act, the moment when the truth could be unleashed like an unstoppable torrent. Each of Isabella's words was a knife, but Fernando knew that soon those blades would be turned against her. The videotape and the documents he carried were his weapon, his father's silenced voice, now ready to cry out for justice. To protect his forgotten daughter, to prevent any misunderstanding, and to ensure the stability and peace of our home, Isabella announced, her voice triumphant. The Alcántara family, in a gesture of immense charity, has decided to offer a generous compensation to Miss Maria, along with the necessary support for her to begin a new life, far from here, with discretion and without fanfare. It is our way of securing her future, in a manner that honors everyone's privacy. The false resolution echoed through the grand salon. It was a masterstroke of manipulation, disguised as generosity, designed to seal Maria's fate forever, to banish her with money and contempt. Believing she had won, Isabella finished her speech with a radiant smile, certain she had delivered the final blow. The applause was scattered, some born of conviction, others of mere formality. Maria felt the floor give way beneath her, the reality of her imminent exile striking her with brutal force. Was this truly her end? Was this the price of her dignity, of her truth? Her heart hammered against her ribs, a drumbeat of despair. But just as she was about to surrender to the crushing weight of it all, a firm, resonant voice cut through the air, shattering Isabella's spell and freezing time in the opulent room like a bolt of lightning in a dark sky. With your permission, Mrs. Alcántara, I must intervene. It was Mr. Ortiz, the lawyer with the troubled conscience, striding towards the podium with a folder in his hand. His voice, though respectful, carried a tone of authority that startled everyone. Isabella glared at him, her smile frozen on her face. Mr. Ortiz, what is this insolence? How dare you interrupt a gala of this nature? Leave at once, she hissed, trying to regain control. But the seed of doubt had already been planted. The interruption was too public, too ill-timed. It was an omen. Fernando rose to his feet, his imposing figure commanding the room. Let him speak, Isabella. Mr. Ortiz is here at my invitation. He has a matter of the utmost importance to discuss, a matter that concerns the entire Alcántara family, and this very gala, a matter that cannot wait. His voice, steady and strong, silenced the murmurs and stopped any attempt by Isabella to dismiss the lawyer. The tension in the room was unbearable as all eyes turned to Ortiz, awaiting the revelation that promised to change the course of the night. Thank you, Don Fernando, Ortiz said, addressing the audience. I was Don Ricardo Alcántara's trusted attorney for many years. Tonight, I have a moral and legal duty to fulfill his final wishes, a message that has remained hidden until now, but which cries out to be revealed, so that justice and truth may prevail, even beyond death. His words resonated with a solemnity that stole the breath from everyone present. From her corner, Maria watched with growing astonishment, not yet comprehending the magnitude of what was about to happen. As technicians, prompted by Fernando, prepared a projector, Mr. Ortiz continued. Before he passed away, Don Ricardo, burdened by a profound secret, entrusted me with a mission that involves a person in this room, someone undeniably tied to the Alcántara lineage. This is not a matter of scandal, but of justice, of love, and of reparation. The projector flared to life, illuminating a large screen and filling the room with anticipation. Isabella, pale and wide-eyed, tried to stop it. This is a farce, slander, she screamed, but her voice was lost in the charged atmosphere. The image of Don Ricardo Alcántara, the patriarch, appeared on the screen. He was younger, but his deep, familiar gaze was the same. A ripple of surprise went through the room. It was an old home video, but the voice was unmistakable. If you are watching this, Fernando, Ricardo began, his voice thick with emotion, it is because the time has finally come for the truth to be known. The truth that my own cowardice and the pressures of society forced me to hide for so many years. A truth that has tormented me to my final days. I have a confession to make, a wrong to right. On the screen, Don Ricardo continued, his eyes glistening with tears. I loved a woman, Aurora, with all my soul, before I married your mother. And from that love, a pure and true love, a daughter was born. A daughter I could not publicly acknowledge, for fear of losing the family fortune. But she is my blood, my firstborn. Her name is Maria, the same Maria who has been so unjustly humiliated in this house. The revelation struck the room like a thunderclap. Maria brought her hands to her mouth, her eyes flooding with tears that now, finally, she let fall. Not of pain, but of liberating astonishment. Isabella's face contorted with shock and fury. Lies! It's all lies! A conspiracy to rob us! She shrieked, lunging toward the screen to shut it off. But Fernando stopped her, his expression a mixture of reproach and sorrow. The guests were stunned, some on their feet, others murmuring in disbelief. The image of the unimpeachable patriarch was crumbling before their eyes, revealing a story of forbidden love and a painfully guarded secret. High society was witnessing, live, the unraveling of one of its most revered families. I have created a trust, Fernando. Don Ricardo's voice continued from the screen, to secure the future of Maria and her sister, Sophia. A trust that will guarantee them a life of dignity and which recognizes Maria's place as my legitimate daughter and heir to a significant part of my fortune. My last wish is that she be given justice, that her honor be restored, and that she be given the place in this family that has always been hers. Do not fail her, my son. Protect your sister. Ricardo's voice faded, leaving a deafening silence in its wake. Fernando, his eyes shining, turned and embraced Maria, who was still trembling with shock. Maria, he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion, you are my sister. Our father wanted you to know the truth, to have what is rightfully yours. I am so sorry for everything you have suffered. Forgive me for not discovering this sooner. His public gesture of recognition moved many in the room. The high society guests watched, a mixture of surprise, compassion, and awe on their faces. The millionaire hero, the magnate, was now revealed as the protective brother, the avenger of a historic injustice. Mr. Ortiz, his voice firm, held up a sealed letter. And this is the original letter from Don Ricardo, authenticated by my signature and a public notary, which corroborates every word of the video and details the terms of the trust. Miss Maria Alcántara, legitimate daughter of Don Ricardo, is now a full-fledged heir to the family fortune. As he spoke, Isabela, overcome by humiliation, collapsed to the floor. Her jewels and designer gown were a brutal contrast to her public defeat. Her face, once a mask of contempt, was now twisted in despair and impotent rage. Her empire of lies had been shattered. The room erupted in murmurs, no longer of scorn, but of astonishment and admiration for Maria. The guests turned to her, their expressions not of disdain, but of respect, and for some, silent guilt. The scandal had transformed into a story of justice and redemption. The truth, so long and cruelly silenced, had emerged in the most public of settings, stripping away hypocrisy and elevating the humble servant to the place that was hers by birthright. Maria's unbreakable dignity had become the light that dispelled the shadows of deceit. Still in Fernando's embrace, Maria lifted her gaze, now filled with a renewed strength. She was no longer the frightened young woman, but the acknowledged daughter, the protected sister. Her tears, once of sorrow, were now of immense relief and profound gratitude. Thank you, Fernando, she whispered. Thank you for this, for the truth. She felt the weight of years of fear and humiliation finally lifting from her shoulders. Fernando looked into her eyes and nodded with a silent promise. His father had found peace, and he had fulfilled his legacy. The gala Isabela had planned as her ultimate triumph had become her public ruin and Maria's ascension. "This is only the beginning, Maria," he said, his voice filled with hope. "Now, we rebuild together." The atmosphere in the salon had transformed. The climax was over, but the journey toward healing and legacy had just begun, promising a future where human dignity would be the true protagonist. From this day forward, the history of the Alcántaras is rewritten, Fernando continued, his arms a protective circle around his newfound sister. And you are its true hero. Maria felt the warmth of his embrace, an unexpected sanctuary after years of fear. These were not just words of comfort, they were the confirmation that her ordeal was over. A new life, one of justice and recognition, was opening before her. Isabela, still on the floor, was a pathetic image of defeat. "It can't be," she moaned, her words a faint echo of her former cruelty. "It's a trap to take what is mine." The guests, once her sycophants, now looked on with a mixture of pity and disgust. Fernando turned to the attendees, his voice ringing with authority. "Tonight, we have witnessed an injustice that has lasted for far too long. But we have also witnessed the courage and unbreakable dignity of an extraordinary woman. My sister, María Alcántara. Tomorrow, I will begin all legal actions to ensure my father's will is fulfilled, and that the damages caused by slander and abuse of power are repaired. The truth will be our only guide." Maria, held by Fernando, felt the ground beneath her feet, once so unstable, become solid. The shock was immense, but a sense of peace was settling in her heart. She was no longer the invisible girl, the humiliated employee. She was María Alcántara, daughter of Ricardo, sister of Fernando. A new identity, full of possibility, awaited her. Her gaze, once clouded with weariness, now shone with the light of hope. A future where her voice would finally be heard and her dignity respected. One by one, the guests, prominent figures of society, began to approach her. Some offered words of apology for their silent complicity, others, genuine admiration for her strength. "Miss Maria, I am so very sorry for what you have endured. Your fortitude is admirable," one woman said, extending a hand. The looks of contempt had transformed into respect, the stigma into recognition. With a shy but sincere smile, Maria accepted their words, knowing this was the first step toward healing the wounds of a painful past. Fernando, with Maria at his side, took the microphone once more. Maria's story, the dignity she has shown in the face of adversity, cannot be an isolated case. We cannot allow more people to suffer in silence. And so, in honor of my father, and in the spirit of the justice he so deeply yearned for, I announce the creation of the Human Dignity Foundation. This foundation will be a beacon of hope for all those who, like Maria, have been humiliated, silenced, and exploited. It will be their voice, their shield, their path to a life of justice and fulfillment. My father wished for his legacy to be one of love, and so it shall be. A murmur of approval rippled through the room, this time one of sincere admiration. "The Human Dignity Foundation," Fernando announced, his voice ringing with a passion he had never before shown in public, "will be dedicated to offering legal, psychological, and educational support to vulnerable workers. We will defend their rights and promote legislative change to guarantee human dignity in every sphere. We want to create a safe space where no one has to trade their self-respect for their employment, a place where the voice of the forgotten can finally resonate with strength and justice. It was the tangible manifestation of his father's regret and the promise of a better future, an inheritance of compassion. And I am proud to announce, Fernando continued, turning to Maria with a warm smile, that the director of this foundation will be Maria Alcántara herself. Her experience, her nobility, and her unbreakable spirit will be the driving force of this noble cause. She, better than anyone, knows what it means to fight for one's dignity. Maria, though stunned, accepted the challenge with her head held high, her eyes shining with renewed determination. I accept this responsibility with all my heart, she declared, her voice still soft, yet resonating with the force of her conviction. I promise to be the voice for those who have none, and I will fight tirelessly for justice. In the days that followed, the Alcántara mansion, once a symbol of opulence and secrets, was transformed into a hub of activity. Mr. Ortiz's lawyers worked tirelessly to establish the trust for Maria and Sofia, securing their future. Fernando, supporting his sister at every step, began dismantling the schemes of Isabela and Director Mendoza. Justice must prevail, Maria, Fernando affirmed, laying the groundwork for a new legacy, not just for you, but for all who will trust in our foundation. The Alcántaras will not be remembered for their luxuries, but for their humanity. Isabela, meanwhile, faced a swift and brutal downfall. Fernando initiated divorce proceedings, and the trust documents exposed her true nature to the press, which now vilified her as a cruel, classist villain. She lost her position on her family company's board and was stripped of much of her fortune and property. The same society that once idolized her now turned its back. My reputation is destroyed, she murmured, alone in her empty study, her reflection in the mirror a mere shadow of her former self. I have nothing left. It was a harsh lesson on the true measure of power. As brother and sister, Fernando and Maria forged an unbreakable bond. They visited Don Ricardo's grave, where Fernando laid down the videotape and his father's letter. Father, your wish has been fulfilled, Fernando said, his voice choked with emotion. Maria has found her place, and together we will build a legacy of dignity. Kneeling, Maria felt her father's presence. Thank you, Papa, she promised, releasing the pain and guilt he had carried for so long. I finally have peace, and I will honor your legacy by protecting others, just as you wished to protect me. The Alcántara name, once associated with power and secrets, began to be synonymous with social justice and genuine philanthropy. Together, Fernando and Maria redefined their family's image, proving that true wealth lies not in material possessions, but in the ability to transform lives and fight for a more equitable world. The family company, under new leadership, implemented innovative labor policies, becoming a model of social responsibility. A choice born from the past had become the foundation for a promising future. An opportunity to change the world, one life at a time. Little Sofia, now under the loving care of Maria and Fernando, flourished in an environment of safety and affection. Fulfilling her promise, Maria ensured her sister received the best education, the love, and the stability life had always denied them. Sophia, you are my reason to fight, my inspiration, Maria would tell her, holding her close. Never forget that your voice matters, that your dignity is unbreakable, and that love is the most powerful force for changing the world. The little girl, with her large, curious eyes, would look at her sister, slowly understanding the magnitude of the story that bound them. Maria and Sophia moved into a beautiful, cozy home with a small garden full of rose bushes, just as Maria had always dreamed. It was no longer a borrowed space, but their own sanctuary, a symbol of their new life. Every morning, Maria watered the flowers, feeling the gratitude and peace that bloomed from that simple act. This is our home, Sophia, she would tell her sister, a place where we will always be safe, where our voices will be heard. She taught her that true wealth was freedom, respect, and the chance to live with honor, far from scornful glares and hurtful words. The story of Maria Alcántara became a powerful testament that human dignity cannot be bought or sold, that money and power, when used to oppress, build only castles of sand that are eventually washed away by the truth, and that sometimes an unexpected hero can rise from the most unlikely of places, breaking chains and unveiling secrets to rebuild a legacy of justice and compassion. The light of truth had scattered the shadows, revealing the value of humility and the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. 5 years later, the Human Dignity Foundation had grown exponentially. What began as a dream had become a national network of support centers, offering free legal aid, job training, and empowerment programs to thousands of vulnerable workers across the country. Maria's story, her transformation from a humiliated employee to a social leader, was told in every corner, inspiring countless others to raise their voices against injustice. The chandeliers of the Alcantara mansion now shone with a different light, the light of hope that radiated from the foundation's many centers. Maria, now a respected leader and an influential voice, championed workers' rights in national and international forums. Her noble gaze, now fortified by experience, inspired confidence and respect. Thanks to her tireless work, crucial legislative changes were passed, protecting the most disadvantaged and guaranteeing fair wages and dignified working conditions. She had shown the world that true wealth was not found in bank accounts, but in compassion, equity, and the ability to transform one's own pain into hope for others. Watching Maria speak with passion about human rights at a public event, Fernando felt a profound sense of satisfaction. He had found not only a sister, but a partner in the mission to make the world a more just place. The Human Dignity Foundation was the legacy his father had always wanted to leave, a promise fulfilled. The camera pans to a bronze plaque at the entrance of one of the foundation's centers. Engraved in golden letters are the words, "The Human Dignity Foundation," in honor of Maria and Ricardo Alcántara, a quiet reminder that dignity has no price.